No one will ever control you again. That is not a slogan. It is a vow. A vow made not with fists, but with awareness. Not through defiance, but through clarity. Because the moment you see the strings, you no longer dance. This is where the Stoic journey begins, not with resistance, with recognition. You are being pulled by words, by moods, by fear, by flattery, by approval, by threat, by silence, by looks, by likes, by the imaginary narratives others write for you. And you keep rehearsing. But what if that ended? What if no one, not a critic, not a crowd, not a loved one, not a stranger, could move you from the ground you choose to stand on? That is not arrogance. That is inner command. And the Stoics built their entire philosophy around it. They didn't want to conquer the world. They wanted to conquer the part of themselves that could be conquered by the world. Because the man who belongs to every opinion belongs to no truth. The man who fears judgment cannot live in virtue. The man who depends on applause will betray himself every time the silence stretches too long. So you start here. What do I control? And the answer is simple. Not much, but enough. Your thoughts, your choices, your principles, your attention, your posture. And the moment you take full responsibility for those without needing the world to do the same, you become unshakable. Not because the world softens, because your center strengthens. The Stoics taught that freedom was not the absence of external power. It was immunity to it. Epictetus was born a slave, beaten, silenced, controlled in every visible way. But he said something few dare to even think. You may chain my leg, but not my will. You may beat my body, but not my judgment. You may speak against me, but I choose what to believe. That is Stoicism, not cold, clear, not distant, disciplined, not empty, aligned. It is the mindset of a man who has looked into the machinery of manipulation and stepped outside of it, who has been hurt, but is no longer hostage, who has felt the pull on but does not follow it anymore, because he knows to be moved without reason is to be owned, and the Stoic bows to no master but reason, not anger, not craving, not fear of being left out, not desire to be seen, just reason. That is his compass. And if the world turns against him, so be it. He does not flinch, because the world does not give him his identity. He gave it to himself, and protects it daily with silence, with simplicity, with self-command. No one will ever control you again, not because you built walls, because you built truth. You no longer beg to be understood. You no longer sacrifice your clarity to be accepted. You no longer trade your time for validation. You sit. You breathe. You observe. You respond. Not from emotion, from principle. And when you fall short, you return. Not with shame, but with discipline. You're not perfect, but you're present. And that makes you dangerous to those who feed on your reaction. Because now, you choose. You choose what enters. You choose what stays. You choose what deserves your breath, your attention, your effort, your correction. And most things, they don't. So you let them pass weak like clouds. That is not detachment. That is mastery. And it begins right now. With a breath. With a pause. With a quiet vow. I will not be ruled. Not by noise, not by shame, not by praise. I belong to what is true, and I return to it, and no matter what comes. That is where the journey begins. You think they control you with force, with commands, with authority. No. They control you with something much softer, much older. Emotion, not even your own, theirs. This is where real control hides. In the subtle pull of another person's reaction. In the unspoken fear that someone might be upset with you. In the desperate urge to not be seen as cold, difficult, uncooperative. So you fold. You say yes when you meant no. You smile when you feel the fire. You change your position, not from principle, but from pressure. You are being controlled, not by a tyrant, by a tone, a sigh, a silence, a raised brow, a disappointed look, and the Stoic says, enough. Because a man who is ruled by the emotional state of other is not free. He is a mirror, not a mind. He is a puppet, and the strings are invisible. You want to break them? You must start with this. Not every emotion deserves a response, especially when it's not yours. Most people have never trained their own emotions. They spill them. They weaponize them. They shape their world not through logic, but through intensity, and if you are not clear, you will be swept into their storm. You will think their urgency is your urgency. Their anger is your mistake. Their silence is your punishment. But it isn't. It never was. You're just not used to standing still. When the world shakes around you. So the Stoic trains for this, to be in the presence of emotion and remain unmoved until reason speaks. Not unfeeling, unrushed, not passive, precise. He listens to what is said, but he waits. He checks with himself. He looks inward before outward. He does not confuse someone's discomfort with his own wrongdoing. He does not collapse just to restore harmony. He understands there is no true peace without principle. And if you betray your principle just to avoid someone's reaction, you are not kind. You are weak. Kindness without clarity is surrender. Compassion without boundaries is collapse. And the Stoic stands, not to dominate, but to remain intact. He speaks gently, but directly. He hears emotion, but responds with alignment. He does not rush to soothe others if it means slicing himself in half, because peace bought with self-betrayal is not peace. It is a temporary truce with long-term damage. So he chooses discomfort, if it means staying clean. He chooses misunderstanding, if it means staying honest. He chooses silence, if it means protecting his truth. Because only then is he free. And the world? The world respects him, maybe not immediately, but eventually, because the world can smell integrity, even through offense, even through friction, even through rejection. And those who cannot, they were never worthy of your adaptation to begin with. So, let them feel what they feel. You are not here to manage the emotions of the crowd. You are here to act with virtue, to stand with clarity, to serve, not submit. And if they yell, breathe. If they cry, listen. If they rage, pause. But never give them what they didn't earn. Your reversal, your retreat, your agreement. If it is not true, you do not speak it. If it is not just, you do not support it. If it is not aligned, you do not carry it. That is the mark of a man who is free. Free from being moved by moods. Free from emotional blackmail dressed as connection. Free from the invisible cage of being liked at all costs. You are no longer for sale. Your yes means something now because it is rare. Your no lands with weight because it is clean. You belong to your compass, not their chaos. And that is the second step. They don't need to command you, all they have to do is expect. That's how most control is exercised, quietly, permanently, through expectation, through the invisible web of shoulds and musts and ought to. That's how it starts. You should be more like this. You're the smart one. You're the strong one. You can't disappoint us. You're not allowed to change. And just like that, a role is assigned. A costume is handed to you. A script is placed in your palm, and you begin to live in as someone else. Because expectations don't feel like cages at first. They feel like safety, like love, like identity, until one day they don't. Until one day you realize you haven't made a single decision in years without wondering what they would think. You haven't taken a single step without checking against the idea of what you're supposed to be, and you've lost something deeper than time, your self-respect. Because the Stoic knows this. To live for someone else's vision of your life is to abandon your post. It is to betray the one duty that no one can do for you, the duty to live in accordance with your own reason. Marcus Aurelius ruled the greatest empire on earth, and yet he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He didn't outsource his ethics. He didn't crowdsource his values. He chose and lived the choice. Not for applause, not for acceptance, for alignment. Because the second you begin shaping your life to satisfy expectations that are not your own, you give up something sacred, your authority. And when that goes, everything goes with it. Your clarity, your confidence, your calm. You become a ghost, rehearsing lines you never wrote, on a stage you didn't build for an audience you don't even recognize. The Stoic refuses that. He knows that expectation, left unchecked, becomes a leash. So he cuts it. Not with rebellion, with responsibility. He says, "I am responsible for the life I live, not the one others wanted me to." That's not selfish. That's sacred. Because when you reclaim your path, you give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror of freedom. Not by convincing, by embodying. You live from principle, not pressure. From reason, not reward. From depth, not decoration. And you stop apologizing for who you've become, even if it doesn't match the story they told about you, especially then. Because peace is not found in being what they want. Peace is found in not needing to be. That doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you stop letting love be an excuse for submission. It means you love clearly, not conditionally. And sometimes, clarity means distance. Sometimes freedom means friction. Sometimes truth costs you their understanding. But the Stoic pays that price, not with resentment, with stillness. Because the cost of betraying yourself is always greater. And once you feel that, once you've lived the slow death of playing a role that doesn't fit, you don't go back. You remove the mask. You set down the script. You look in the mirror and say, "From this moment forward, I choose who I am becoming." Not based on expectation, based on what is right, based on what is real, based on what I will not regret on my last day. That is when you become untouchable. Not because they stop expecting, because you stop conforming. You stop explaining. You stop editing your soul to fit someone else's lens, and you begin to live authentically, ruthlessly, rightly. That is the third step. Praise. It sounds like love. It feels like approval. It lands like safety. But for the untrained soul, praise is a trap. Because the moment you start needing it, you start bending for it, reaching for it, living for it. and without realizing it, your freedom is gone, not stolen, traded. This is the fourth lesson. The moment you need to be validated, they own you. Not by force, by flattery, by applause, by a look that says, "Good job," by a nod that says, "Now we accept you." But what happens when the nod disappears? What happens when the room grows silent? When your work goes unnoticed? When no one claps? Do you stop? Do you doubt? Do you shrink? If yes, then you were never free. You were just compliant, tethered to a reward, dependent on permission, dancing to avoid rejection. And the Stoic says, never again. He does not reject praise, but he does not depend on it, because the man who needs to be seen will betray himself the moment no one's looking. But the man who acts from principle, with or without applause, is free. Free to speak truth when it's unpopular. Free to act rightly when no one rewards it. Free to walk alone when integrity demands it. This is not a rejection of community. This is independence within community. You are not ice. You are fire, but fire that does not flicker in the wind of opinion, because you know who you are when no one's watching. You know what matters when no one reminds you. You know what's worth doing even when it earns you nothing. That is the posture of a sovereign soul. Marcus Aurelius ruled over the Roman Empire. He had more praise than most men could imagine, and yet he reminded himself, do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not what they say that matters. It is what you do, and why. So you stop asking, did they notice? Did they like it? Did they approve? And you start asking, was it just? Was it necessary? Was it aligned? Because anything else is slavery. Slavery to likes, to compliments, to recognition. But all of it fades. And the cost? Your soul, your sleep, your silence. Because a man who performs for praise never rests. He lives in fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being surpassed. Fear of not being seen. And fear is no place to build a home. So the Stoic walks away from it. Not because he's proud, because he's clear. He builds in silence. He works in solitude. He acts rightly, even when wrongly judged, because he understands. Virtue is its own reward. To live rightly is enough. To speak truth is enough. To walk with integrity, even if no one understands, is enough. And that enough is what makes him untouchable. Because what can you take from a man who does not need your praise? What can you use to manipulate him? What threat do you hold if he's already free? None. And so he becomes something rare. A man who cannot be bought. Man who cannot be baited. A man who does not shift with the crowd. Because he does not belong to them. He belongs to himself. To truth. To discipline. To clarity. That is the way, not to never hear praise, but to hear it, and not change posture. To lose it, and not lose heart. To live as if your actions are being watched by the only judge that matters, your own conscience. And when that conscience is clean, you walk without fear. That is the fourth step. You thought they were controlling you. You thought the boss, the critic, the stranger online had the power. But they don't. Not really. Because the most powerful prison is not the one they build. It's the one you build inside your own mind. This is the fifth lesson. No one can control you more completely than your own unchecked thoughts. Not the facts. The story. The way you explain your failures. The meaning you assign to silence. The way you twist discomfort into danger, uncertainty into doom, and imperfection into shame. That's where real control lives, not in chains. In narrative, you tell yourself, I'm not good enough. This always happens to me. They're probably thinking the worst. If I fail, I am nothing. If I don't win, I lose all value. None of it is true, but it feels true because you've repeated it so many times it became your default lens. So even when no one's criticizing you, you criticize yourself. Even when no one's watching, you perform anyway. Even when you're free to choose and you obey the old fear without knowing. That's not life. That's autopilot. That's psychological slavery. And the Stoic says, end it not with noise, with awareness. The Stoic begins every day not by asking, what do I feel, but what is real? Because feelings are waves. They rise, they crash, they pass. But if you mistake them for truth, you build a life on shifting tides, and you wonder why everything feels so unstable. So he trains his mind, not to be happy, to be clear, to see reality without the fog of narrative, to notice the story, and question it before he obeys it. Because most of what the mind says is reflex, not reflection. Fear disguised as logic, ego disguised as instinct. So he slows down. He writes. He watches his thoughts the way a general watches a battlefield. Not every signal is worth reacting to. Not every voice is worth answering. Not every what if is a warning. Some are traps, some are ghosts, some are echoes from a past that no longer applies. But if you don't examine them, you surrender to them. And when you surrender to your own mental noise, you no longer need enemies. You've become your own. That's why the Stoic protects his inner citadel. He builds it, brick by brick, through stillness, reflection, and repeated right action. He catches the voice that says, you're not ready, and moves anyway. He challenges the whisper that says they'll laugh, and speaks anyway. He faces the thought, you'll fail, and replies, and I will still be whole. Because the Stoic does not aim to silence the mind. He aims to master his relationship with it, to be its commander, not its captive. That is what freedom looks like. Not an empty mind, a trained one, a mind that can see thought as thought, not as law, a mind that can interrupt its own loops, a mind that can step outside itself, long enough to question and choose differently. That is power, not brute strength, inner discernment, not the absence of fear, the ability to walk forward while fear speaks and not take its orders, because fear will always speak. So will doubt, so will old pain, so will the voice of the parent, the teacher, the failure, the regret. But you are not those voices. You are the one listening and choosing what to believe. And when you choose rightly, you break the deepest chain. You no longer need the world to release you. You have released yourself from your own unexamined mind, and that is the fifth step. Now you're lighter. The chains are cracking. The noise is quieter. You've begun to question what once ruled you. You've started seeing through the false debts, the emotional blackmail, the unspoken roles, the internal narratives you didn't choose. And for the first time, you don't flinch. You don't rush to explain. You don't reach to fix what isn't yours. You just breathe and stay still. Not stubborn, sovereign. This is the sixth lesson. Freedom is not just release from control, it's release from the need to be reactive. Because control doesn't always look like a threat. Sometimes it looks like urgency, like tension, like a social cue that says, move faster. Answer now. Be agreeable. Don't pause. It makes people uncomfortable, and yet the Stoic pauses anyway. He steps back, while the world lunges forward. He speaks slowly, while the world shouts. He acts with clarity, while the crowd reacts from confusion. Not because he's better, because he's trained, because he's not here to mirror others. He's here to embody something more solid, something they've forgotten: self-possession. He owns his breath, he owns his gaze, he owns his response, especially when provoked. He understands, if I can be provoked, I can be manipulated. If I must answer, I can be baited. If I need to be liked, I will be shaped into whatever they want me to be, and call it kindness. So he stops needing, and he starts choosing. That is freedom, not absence of tension, inner space within tension. The space to see clearly before responding, the space to feel anger and not let it steer the wheel, the space to feel misunderstood and not rush to prove your worth, the space to feel an opportunity rouse and still ask, is this aligned? That space? It's sacred. It's where peace lives. It's where virtue speaks. It's where all your training pays off, and in the gap between stimulus and choice. And most never find it, because they're always in a hurry, because they confuse urgency with importance, because they've been conditioned to think silence is weakness and stillness is hesitation. But the Stoic knows, stillness is strength. Stillness is power that doesn't flinch. Stillness is fire that doesn't waste smoke. Stillness is a man who can be in the center of the storm and still choose what direction to face. You want to be free? Stop reacting. Start responding. Stop defending yourself against everything that touches your ego. Start standing in what's unshakable. Because when you stop being ruled by your reflexes, you become your own master. You no longer bark when poked. You no longer collapse when ignored. You no longer chase when affection is withheld. You remain still, aware, grounded. Not because nothing matters, because you know what does. You know what's real. You know what's yours, your action, your word, your principle. That is enough. And once you begin to live from that, everything else quiets. The chaos loses its grip, the bait loses its taste, and you walk forward, not looking back to see who approves, not rushing to correct every misunderstanding, not grasping for safety in things that are always slipping away. You are safe. Not because life is certain, but because your posture is. That is Stoicism. Not detachment from life. Total engagement, without losing yourself. That is the sixth step. You no longer flinch. You no longer chase. You no longer check the mirror to see if your worth is still intact. And you no longer explain your every move to people who are never listening. That is not rebellion. That is return. A return to something ancient, still, unmoved. You. This is the seventh lesson. Once you reclaim your inner ground, nothing outside can make you betray it again. You walk into rooms not needing to dominate them. You speak, not to convince, but to contribute. You act, not for applause, not for defense, but because the act itself is clean. You are not against the world. You are simply no longer under it, no longer looking for permission to be who you are, no longer editing your truth to fit the taste of a temporary crowd, no longer adjusting your depth to meet someone else's shallowness. You just stand, quietly, fully, unapologetically, not because you're louder than them, because you're anchored, and an anchored man doesn't argue with every current. He doesn't chase every insult. He doesn't correct every false version of himself floating in someone's mind. He knows who he is, and that is enough. You feel that? That's peace. But not peace as escape. Peace is readiness. Because there is no need to hide when you have nothing to hide. There is no need to control when you are already in command of what matters. There is no need to grasp when you are full, already. And this kind of fullness cannot be bought, it cannot be inherited. It is not granted by position or fame or power, it is earned. Through choice, through loss, through hours of being misunderstood, and remaining aligned anyway. You've earned it. Through the weight you carried, through the silences you held, through the truths you told, even when your voice shook. And now you see. No one can control you anymore, because there's nothing in you left to hook. You don't need their flattery. You don't fear their criticism. You don't rely on their attention. You are free, because your peace does not require anything outside of your own alignment. And the beauty of this, you don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to explain, prove, or argue. You simply live, rightly. And that rightness speaks louder than any defense ever could. It's in your walk, in your gaze, in your decisions, in the way you do not react when lesser men expect a storm. That calm, that composure, it shakes people more than rage ever could, because they don't know what to do with someone who cannot be moved. But that's not your problem. You're not here to be digestible. You're not here to be palatable. You're not here to perform. You are here to be whole, to be exact, to be disciplined, not for the sake of image, but for the sake of truth. And you live that truth now, not as a performance, but as presence. Nothing left to defend, nothing left to hide, nothing left to chase, just the man as he is. And that man, he doesn't collapse, he doesn't cling, he doesn't calculate his worth based on someone else's smile or silence. He simply stands in what is right and moves forward, not with noise, with precision, not with fire in his fists, with light in his eyes. Because when you become this, truly this, you realize the fight was never outside. It was always within. And now, there is nothing left to conquer, only more to live. And that is the seventh step. You've learned to stand. You've learned to return to yourself. You've learned to stop reacting, stop explaining, stop begging for understanding. But now comes the hardest part. Letting go of even the version of you that knows how to stand. Because identity is just another role. And the moment you start clinging to the strong one, the silent one, the stoic one, you are back in the costume. You are not free. You are performing freedom. This is the eighth lesson. True freedom means you are no longer trapped even in your own self-image. Even strength, when clung to, becomes a weight. Even silence, when used to hide, becomes cowardice. Even wisdom, when worn like armor, becomes ego. So the Stoic moves deeper. He peels off the last layer. He releases the need to be seen as anything, not strong, not wise, not impressive, not composed. Just right, just present, just useful to the hour, nothing more. He doesn't need to feel like himself to act with integrity. He doesn't need to protect his myth. He doesn't need to win the narrative. He just does what the moment calls for, with total presence and zero vanity. And this is where the real power is. Not in being the man who can't be controlled, but in being a man who doesn't need to be called anything at all. He shows up, he serves, he speaks, he lets go and moves on. Like a soldier of the soul. Like a fire that warms then extinguishes, without demanding to be remembered. because who he is less important than what he chooses. And what he chooses is always the same. What is the right thing to do right now, regardless of how it makes me look? That question cuts through the last illusion, because even discipline can become ego, even clarity can become pride, even presence can be turned into posture. But virtue? Virtue is humble. It doesn't need to be noticed. It doesn't care to be named, it just acts and disappears into the fabric of the day. That's what the Stoic seeks, to become invisible to the ego, not absent, just unhooked, just uninterested, in the applause of the self. Because when you stop clinging to who you think you are, no one can use it against you. They can call you weak. Fine. They can call you cold. Fine. They can call you arrogant, passive, soft, hard, inconsistent, untrustworthy, whatever story makes them feel in control. But you remain, not because you defend yourself, because there's nothing left to defend. Your identity is not under attack, because you're not holding it like a flag. You're just living straightforward, clear-minded, detached from image. And that detachment? It's not distance, it's presence. It means you can finally be here, Mada, without constantly editing yourself in your own mind. It means you can act rightly, without needing to stay on brand. It means you can change, without fearing loss of reputation, because you never needed the reputation. You only needed alignment, and now you have it. Now you move like water, still when stillness is right, forceful when force is right. Now you walk like a man with nothing to prove, only things to do. Now you live like someone who no longer asks, "How do I look?" but simply asks, "Is this true?" and acts from there. That is what cannot be controlled, because you cannot blackmail a man with identity if he has let it go. You cannot bind a man with the need to be seen if he's willing to disappear. You cannot steer a man with vanity if he is willing to be misunderstood in the name of what's right, and that is the 8th step. They don't control you anymore. Not with fear, not with praise, not with silence, emotion, or expectation. But now comes the final test. Can you live without recognition? Can you give and not be seen? Can you act and not be remembered? Can you serve and vanish like wind over stone? This is the 9th lesson. To be truly free, you must let go of the need to leave a mark, because as long as you need credit, you are still a hostage to memory, to image, to legacy. And while the world says make a name for yourself, the Stoic whispers make your life worthy, and even if no name remains. You are not here to impress. You are here to contribute. You are not here to be known. You are here to live rightly, moment by moment, quietly, relentlessly. Because peace is not built by adding to your reputation. It's built by subtracting what distracts from your reason. And very often, recognition is a distraction. You begin a good deed and start imagining how others will talk about it. You take a right action and secretly hope it spreads. You write, speak, give, and quietly hope someone remembers. That's not wrong. It's human. But it's also where the leash hides. Because the moment you need to be known, you begin to act for their memory, not your conscience. And the Stoic refuses that trade. He gives and lets go. He acts and forgets. He speaks and walks away, because he knows the best things he will ever do, no one will ever see. And that's okay, that's good, because it means he's clean. He's not building an image, he's not building a monument, he's just doing the work, the inner work, the silent work, the hard, holy, unnoticed work, and that is what makes him free, because they can't take anything from you. If you never built it for them, they can't manipulate you with shame if you're not addicted to pride. They can't threaten your identity if you've already let it dissolve. They can't cancel you. If you never played for their applause, you were never here for that. You were here for the way of the Stoic, the way of the clean mind, the way of the quiet act, the way of the man who passes through the world like wind, felt, not captured. Presence, not a performance, a force, not a brand. A man whose deeds speak louder than his name, and whose peace does not rise or fall with who's listening. Because that man, he cannot be owned. Not by enemies, not by friends, not by ghosts of his former self. He's moved past all that. Now he lives like water on stone. He shapes the world by showing up. He leaves no banner behind. He asks no one to remember. He asks only one thing of himself. Did I live today in accordance with truth? If yes, that is enough. He needs no statue. He needs no echo. He needs only to walk forward, empty-handed, steady-eyed, rooted in the deep law of life. Act rightly. Then let go. That is the ninth step. You will die, and no one can stop it. Not your willpower, not your wealth, not your discipline, not even your wisdom. This is the boundary, the line no man crosses. But the Stoic, he does not fear it. He faces it and is freed. This is the 10th lesson. Once you make peace with death, you are finally untouchable, because most men are not ruled by kings or tyrants or armies. They are ruled by fear, the deepest fear of all. What if this ends before I'm ready? But here's the truth, it will. It always does. No one leaves on time, because there is no perfect time. There is only now, and then silence. So the Stoic does not wait. He does not postpone the right action for a day that may never come. He does not carry old arguments into tomorrow. He does not hoard love like there will be infinite time to give it later. He speaks now. He forgives now. He lives now, because death to him is not an enemy. It is a reminder, a narrowing lens, a sharpener of attention, a compass that makes every trivial thing suddenly meaningless, and every real thing suddenly urgent. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." That is the posture. That is the sword. Not to conquer death. To live in a way that death cannot touch. Because what can death do to a man who has already lived fully? What can death steal from someone who wasted nothing? Not time, not presence, not truth. That's the secret the world tries to forget. You are not promised another sunrise. You are not guaranteed another chance to speak with care, to act with clarity, to leave nothing undone. And that is not sad. That is liberating. Because once you stop believing in later, you start showing up like never before. You stop rehearsing. You stop hiding. You stop delaying what you know must be done. And you begin to walk as if the next step might be your last. Not with dread, but with honor, with weight, with reverence. And that walk, it cannot be controlled. Because a man who is no longer bargaining for more time cannot be manipulated by fear of losing it. He has already accepted the cost, and so he acts now, cleanly, precisely, completely. He speaks now, truthfully, even if it's hard. He loves now, deeply, even if it's brief, because he knows that death is not waiting at the end of some distant road. It walks beside him. It walks beside you, right now. And if you're brave enough to look at it, really look, you will find that it is not a monster, it is a mirror. And in that mirror you will see a question, not asked with words but with silence. Are you wasting the time I've given you? If yes, indeed change. If no, continue. But do not ignore it. Do not turn away. Do not pretend you are immortal just because the sky is still blue. You are not. You are dying. And in that truth is the birth of something rare. Presence. Real presence. The kind that makes every conversation count. The kind that fills every hour with gravity. The kind that removes all need to be controlled. Because you already know what matters, and when you know what matters, the rest fades. The opinions, the noise, the temptation to delay. Gone. Because now you walk with death, not behind you, but beside you. And because of that, you are finally free. That is the 10th step. You have nothing left to prove, nothing left to hold, nothing left to protect. And in that emptiness, you have everything. This is the 11th lesson. Live in a way that makes death irrelevant. Live so rightly that no moment owns you. Not because you expect perfection, but because you practice completion. You wake up each day not as a burden, but as a brief, beautiful contract with time, and you ask yourself, what needs to be said so I don't carry it into the grave? What needs to be done so I don't leave it on someone else's back? What truth must be lived today so I don't regret tomorrow? That is not pressure, that is freedom, because most people die with their hands full of apologies never spoken, full of chances never taken, full of resentment, fear, image, pride. But the Stoic, he dies empty because he emptied himself every day of what didn't matter, of what didn't belong, of what could not be carried beyond the breath. He spoke while he had voice. He acted while he had strength. He forgave before life demanded. And he walked light and walked far, and when the end comes, he does not beg for more time. He bows, because there is nothing unfinished, nothing unsaid, nothing unlived. That is the posture of the free. Not the man with years ahead, the man with no debts behind, not the man who avoided death, the man who stared it in the face and chose to live so cleanly that death could take nothing. You want peace? You want to be untouchable? Then don't avoid the end. Work backward from it. Use it as a scalpel. Let it cut away the shallow. Let it silence the petty. Let it sharpen your priorities until your day becomes a blade, and every move you make slices through illusion. That's the Stoic way. To live not just mindfully, but mortally. To walk through your day with the awareness, I could die tonight. So how do I want to leave this room? This person? This life? You want clarity? Let that question shape you. You want focus? Let that truth strip you bare. You want immunity from being controlled? Then hold this one fact in your hands every day. You are already on borrowed time. No boss can threaten you. No critic can diminish. No manipulation can shame you. Because you are already aware that all of this is temporary. And you act like it. You walk like it. You give like it. You forgive like it. You let go. Not because it's easy, but because you know, I don't get to keep anything anyway. So let me not grip what will rot. Let me not hoard what I can't carry. Let me not cling to things that belong to the dust. You are dust, but you are divine for as long as breath passes through your lungs. And in that flicker of time, you live like a flame, not for legacy, for light, not to be remembered, to remember yourself, and in doing that, you become unshakable, because you have nothing left for them to control. Not your time, not your name, not your fate. You've given it all to virtue, and now you can't be touched. That is the 11th step. This is where it ends. Not with applause, not with ceremony, with a breath, with silence. And no one is coming to thank you. No one is coming to validate the battles you fought in secret. No one is coming to crown you for walking the path few dared to even look at. But that's exactly what makes you free. Because this is the 12th and final lesson. You no longer need to be anything except the man who does what is right until the end. No pride, no titles, no legacy, no myths to protect. You simply stand. Because standing is what must be done. You no longer look for meaning outside of the moment. You no longer seek comfort in the reaction of others. You no longer trace your worth through the eyes of anyone else. You are self-contained, not detached, engaged, not absent, exact. You're not waiting for the world to become fair. You're not hoping life softens. You're not bargaining with the gods for one more chance. You've already made your choice. I will live rightly, even if no one sees it, even if no one remembers, even if it changes nothing but the man I've become. And that man, he's carved from repetition. He's not loud, he's precise. He's not addicted to power. He knows power without control is weakness. He's not afraid of death. He knows worse than death is living out of sync with one's own conscience. He doesn't need ease. He doesn't crave relief. He doesn't ask for clarity before committing. He chooses in the fog, in the tension, in the ache, because that's where character is made. He walks into the fire without asking if the path will be worth it, because it's not about reward, it's about posture. You see, the truly free man is not the one who escaped suffering. It's the one who embraced responsibility without needing anything in return. He doesn't get bitter. He doesn't flinch when life turns cold. He doesn't tighten his grip when things begin to slip. He lets go, but never of virtue. He lets go, but never of reason. He lets go, but never of the sacred duty to act. Like a man who understands he may not get another sunrise. That's the weight you carry now. And it is light, because you have become strong. No one can manipulate you, because you have nothing left they can use. You've burned the masks. You've buried the ego. You've stepped out of the games and said, let the world spin how it wants, I will walk straight. You answer to something higher now, not a god, not a law, but the inner tribunal. That place in you that never lies, and to that place you bow, not with shame, with clarity, because that place knows who you are, not in image, but in deed. And when your last breath comes, and because it will, you will not resist, because you've lived, you've given, you've lost, you've risen, you've corrected, you've shown up every day, even when it was thankless, even when it was lonely, even when it was quiet, especially then. And that's what makes your life complete. Not that it was easy, not that it was remembered, but that it was yours. Through every scar, every silence, every sacrifice, all of it. Earned, not performed. You walked this earth with a spine that would not bend for what was beneath you. You walked this earth as a man who could not be bought, broken, or controlled. Not because you were untouchable, because you had already let go of everything they could touch. You lived stripped, And in that bareness, you found something no chain can bind. Dignity, unshakable. And so now, the final act is not drama. It is discipline, a breath, a silence, a return. And when it comes, you don't plead. You bow. You stand until the end. And you leave. Without noise. Because noise is for the restless. And you have finished the work. That is the 12th step. That is freedom.